Okay, welcome everyone. We're live on the air for the first time in a long time, many months. Tonight we're going to do Monk Radio questions and answers via the radio page at radio.sirimangalo.org. So we'll just maybe wait a few minutes here for people to sign up. Just going to get my camera set up. I'm going to try to this time record individual videos to be able to put them on YouTube. Let's see if here we are live. Okay. All right, so if you want to ask questions, you can go to radio.sirimangalo.org. If you want to post comments about the video, if there's some problem like you can't hear me or you don't know where to go to ask questions, you can post comments on the YouTube page or wherever you're seeing the video. Post comments on the video. But asking questions is going to be at one single location because it gives us a neat ability to vote on the questions. So we can arrange them based on popularity and hopefully quality. And that is at radio.sirimangalo.org or at Google Moderator. There's a link to the Google Moderator page on our radio page. So I'm not sure if this is going to give me live comments or not, but whatever. Anyway, okay. So we have two cameras set up, web camera in front and the better quality video camera off to the side. They both should be picking up this microphone. Yes, they're both picking up the microphone. Just maybe set a little too loud. Oh, we got a problem. Why would that be? I see. Okay. Just gonna do a mic check. Just bear with me. Test. Okay, I got good sound. Just gonna turn the mic down a little bit. Test, test. Yeah, because we got it too loud over there. Test, test. Test, 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 test. Why do we have such? Well, that's no good. We got a whole bunch of feedback. That's not that bad. I think that's doable. All right, enough of that. Gonna have to do. Or not. Maybe I should use another microphone. Yeah, that's better. All right, so we're using two microphones then. I think that should cut down some of that background noise as well, because otherwise we have this loop or something. I don't know. All right, we're live. Welcome everyone. Okay, and I'm seeing some comments here on the video, which is great, but just to point out that that's not the place to be asking questions, if that's what you're doing there. Questions should be posted at radio.sirimongolo.org solely. Right, okay. So we're just going to get started. I don't have a partner tonight. I think it'd be too difficult to reroute the audio. I'll have to figure that out later. For now, I will be asking and answering these questions. So, then without further ado, we'll just get started. Let's check. Yes, okay. 5 hours. Okay, so I'll probably be doing videos here until around 7, which is about 2 hours, or maybe an hour and a half. We'll see how much energy I have. Again, this may be all, it's going to be a little bit new, so we'll have to see how the quality goes as I get back into it. Okay, so right. Okay, we're ready. Question number 1. Bante, how important is studying the Abhidhamma Pitaka to the practice of Vipassana? Some dismiss it by saying that the Abhidhamma was preached to the Devas and Brahmas and that the Sutta Pitaka is enough for us humans. Right. I like to consider that the Tipitaka in its entirety is really best used by a teacher to pass on the teaching. A person who reads the Tipitaka without a teacher, I would say, whether it be whatever Pitaka it be, is in danger of misunderstanding the teachings for so many reasons. One, of course, is the translation. So unless you're accessing the Pali, there's always that you read a certain translation and it can throw you off based on your understanding of the words and the translator's understanding of the Pali and so on. But the teachings, for example, the suttas, can throw you off because they're designed. They're some of them, many of them, were directed at a particular audience, and that audience may not be you, and it may not be universal. So some people, I think the Buddha even said this, that some people mistake a specific teaching for a universal teaching, and some people mistake a universal teaching for a specific teaching. And so you'll say, well, the Buddha said this, and that contradicts this, and it can even lead, of course, to doubting the Buddha, uh, but because you see in one place he says one thing, in another place he seems to say another thing. With the Abhidhamma, uh, because it's so terse. In fact, if you study the Abhidhamma, um, the the potential for misunderstanding is great. Uh, mostly I would say the potential for getting lost is great and getting discouraged and giving up. So, long story short, I wouldn't put too much emphasis on the importance of studying Abhidhamma unless you're a teacher who has been given the teachings by a teacher yourself and is interested in using these teachings to explain some of the experiences that come up in meditation, which the Abhidhamma is able to do. It's able to categorize and help us to stay on the straight and narrow. So in it is possible that they work together in this way, most especially for a teacher, because where the Sutta Pitaka is vague and inexact, the Abhidhamma can sharpen it up, and so they can work together. And I guess if I was going to say anything, that the three Pitakas should or do work very well together. Obviously, many people say that Abhidhamma is not even the Buddha's teaching. Some people say it's goes against the Buddha's teaching even. Um, but I would say it complements the suttas quite nicely, because if you just read the suttas, you're reading talks that the Buddha gave to audiences. If you read the Abhidhamma, you're reading theory, very specific and exact theory. Now, whether you agree with that theory or believe it was the Buddha's theory, that's another thing. And the Vinaya, of course, without the Vinaya, just reading the suttas without the Vinaya, uh, deprives you of the base of morality, which is essential for keeping you on the right track and making sure that the meditation that you do cultivate is grounded in the wholesomeness, which the Vinaya Pitaka does. So I would say if you're going to read them all, but don't certainly rely on the Pitaka, much more rely on well, maybe not much more, but at least as much rely on a teacher, because then, of course, the other problem is how do you know that the teacher is going by the Buddha's teaching? There's no easy answer to that. But of course, your question was simply the importance of studying the Abhidhamma. Where is its place? I would say in helping to straighten or direct the Sutta Pitaka and keep it from running astray, because you've got categories and you've got lots of very specific and exact guidelines for what is real and what fits where, what is wholesome, what is unwholesome, and so on and so on. There's very strict guidelines that allow you to answer some of the questions that are posed by the Sutta Pitaka, for example. But in studying Vipassana, not really important unless you don't have a teacher. If you don't have a teacher at all, then all you've got is the Tipitaka. I would say all three of them go together and have an equal importance, or have an importance. How equal it is, I can't say, but are important, and it seems to me fairly equal, the importance of the three. I think if you give up the Abhidhamma, you're running in danger of the ambiguity of the suttas. Okay, I think that worked. Next question. I have been in study and practice of Buddhist meditation since my teens. I have obtained a slight bit of clairvoyance. What I wanted to know is what are your thoughts about such mental powers? As I understand, the Theravada consider them a hindrance. No, the Theravadins do not consider them a hindrance. Consider them to be byproducts, good things that are not necessary for the path. It's not necessary to become clairvoyant, to become enlightened. They are a byproduct, a fruit of the holy life or the religion, of the spiritual life. They are a fruit, recognizable, realizable, verifiable in the here and now. Um, so those are my thoughts about them. I think they're neat things that have a great potential for creating right view and helping us to realize the importance of the mind, the vastness of reality beyond the material realm, and so on and so on. But certainly not necessary, and not to be caught up, not to be got caught up in, not to be the object of obsession, or not something to let yourself get caught up in. Good for you, though. Congratulations. Clairvoyance is not an easy thing. Is Nibbana the mere annihilation of the defilements, or is it an existing reality which is subjected to the mind free of defilements, or is it an existing reality that annihilates the defilements as a result of being subjected to the cultivated mind? I'm not going to answer that. Cop out. Real cop out. It's too complicated. It hurts my brain. Sorry. New rule. If a question hurts my brain, I don't answer. What do you think about crying, the Buddhist view about crying? Sometimes I think about death of myself and my loved ones, and I get terrified. Does the Buddhist teaching Is the Buddhist teaching to watch such hard experiences in life without judging? Seems hard to apply. Well, the Buddhist teaching in general is hard to apply. It's for most of us, it's not an easy thing. So that's a red herring. Don't write anything off as being hard to apply, because impossible to apply or inapplicable would be something else. But hard to apply doesn't apply. Um, Thinking about death, that's a good thing. Good thing, helps us to overcome the state of being terrified. So you say it makes you terrified. Well, that's a sign for you that you have clinging, you have attachment to those things that you're terrified about of losing. Because death isn't terrifying. It's something that comes to all beings. It arises, it ceases, it's inevitable. But the fact that you're terrified about something is that you is an aversion to that thing happening. In this case, losing loved ones. So you have the Buddhist teaching, Piyato Jayate Soko, that which is dear. From that which is dear comes sadness, or in this case, crying. The Buddhist view on crying is twofold. In some cases, it can be rapture-based, so people who practice meditation can get so enthralled with the practice that they start to cry without any reason. But in this case, it sounds like crying with a reason, which is a product of sadness and unwholesomeness. Either way, the physical manifestation of tears is, I'm pretty sure, and I keep telling people this, so I'm hoping the science is correct, is accompanied by endorphins. So which are some kind of happy drug. They actually make you happy and they're soothing. And so it's evolutionary, something we've evolved to allow us to keep us from becoming paralyzed when pain or suffering comes to us. As a result, it's quite addictive, and it becomes a response to unpleasant situations. Um, and in a way that is actually addictive, in a way that we actually use to feel happy, feel pleasure, and so it's quite negative. It can be quite negative. Crying itself is neutral, but the cultivation of crying, where it becomes a habit, is quite negative, because it's easy to be because we become addicted to the actually pleasant states that come from crying. People say crying is a sad, is an unpleasant thing. Crying is actually quite a pleasant thing, for whatever reason it arises, because of the physical pleasure that comes from the drugs that you're feeding yourself. So important to watch that. When you cry, you should remind yourself crying. When if you feel happy, when you feel the pleasure of the chemicals, that the endorphins or whatever they are that come from crying, you should say feeling, or happy, and so on. If you like it, you should say liking, and that's all. It's something that comes and goes. Crying itself is not a big deal. Sadness is a problem, and of course, attachment to the crying is a problem. These are things that should be seen as they are, and discarded as unessential. Since thoughts are the main distractors from the present moment during daily activities, why did the Buddha put an emphasis on watching the body postures? When you walk, know you're walking, etc. It seems like watching my thoughts helps me catch them. Well, he didn't put any particular emphasis on watching the bodily postures. For instance, saying that it's better than watching the mind, but he put it first, and I think we can infer from that something important, that it's easier and more basic. The body is always there, easy to find, and so it's what most meditation teachers advise their students to focus on, because it's most obvious and most easy to put your attention on, to keep your attention on. Um, Thoughts are fleeting and hard to catch, especially for a beginner, and so they are better relegated to a later, more advanced, somewhat more advanced. Like, let's say, for example, in an instruction of meditation, we would explain the body first, and then the feelings, and then the mind. So by the time we got to our explanation of the mind, the meditator already had some basic idea of how to be mindful of something quite um, coarse and obvious, which is the body, watching the breath, watching the seated position. That's much easier than having them watch the mind. Um, so no, I'd say he didn't put an emphasis on the body postures, but he put them first, and we shouldn't ignore that fact. And when teaching the meditation to others, or with ourselves, when um, determining a base to come back to in our meditation, to start at in our meditation, we should find something bodily, something physical, because it's more obvious and more easy to base ourselves on it. At any given time, you can watch the foot, or you can watch the stomach, or you can watch the body in whatever posture that it's in. The mind is not like that. The mind is fleeting, and you can't say what thought is going to come next. It's unstable in a way that the body is not, is more stable. After a psychedelic experience, I realized the ego is not real. I feel this has had a lasting impression on me. I have tried to use meditation to help me stay tethered to this state, but I feel myself clinging to old patterns. What should I do? We should break this up into, I guess, at least, let's say, two parts. I can see two parts here that are essential, two different things that you have to be able to break up. Now, the Buddha was the Buddha was described as a vibhajyawading, one who. So what distinguishes the Buddha's teaching is his ability to separate realities and not get them muddled. Now, you say you had a realization. Now, that's momentary. There's a realization that the ego is not real. Then you say this had a lasting impression on you. So something resulted from that realization. These are two different things. So you want to stay tethered to the state, which for sure is the second one, the latter. This usually pleasant, calm, peaceful, something like that, something positive, something that is actually clung to as a result. It's something that is pleasant, it's a relief from suffering, but it's also impermanent suffering and non-self. And so when you cling to that, you feel unpleasant, you feel frustrated, you feel discouraged because you can't cling to it because it disappears. Now the knowledge, um, well, it doesn't really matter. The knowledge came and went. The knowledge was something, the realization was something that most likely came from your, well, you say it came from a psychedelic experience, but it was a trigger for some peaceful, pleasant, powerful state, some state of a state that you equate with a realization, with a an enlightenment of some sort. But that state is a positive state, meaning positive in the sense that it's something that has arisen, and anything that arises ceases. So that state is not something that should be clinged to. In fact, what you're clinging to, you're not just clinging to old patterns. You're also clinging to this state. So you're trying to stay tethered to a state which is wrong, which is a cause for clinging. It's something that will create more attachment, partiality. You're partial to this state. So that, and this, why I'm giving this such a treatment is because this is common. It's common for people to have these realizations and then say, "But I couldn't keep it." What do you mean you couldn't keep it? A realization is a moment. So what you're talking about keeping is this powerful state that's temporary but comes from a release. It's something that is a relief to you, and so you cling to that, and as a result want it to come back. Realizations are like you could say like meals along the way. They rejuvenate you, but they're not. It's not the realization that we're looking for. The final goal is something that isn't clung to, can't be clung to. It's not a positive state in the sense that it doesn't arise. It's the cessation, and that's Nirvana, and there would be no clinging. There can be no clinging to that. It's something different. So be very careful not to cling to the product of your realizations, these insights that come. Don't cling to them. It's called jnana. When we cling to knowledge, it's a upakilesa. It's a defilement or a detriment to our practice. Keeps us from progressing. How different is Chanda from Tanha? There's Kama Chanda and then there's Kusala Chanda. Obviously, Kama Chanda involves craving, but how does Kusala Chanda work? Is it fair to say Chanda is mere inclination? For example, preferring the Dhamma as opposed to gossip. Chanda is like your inclination. Is that what you said? Yes, inclination. The truth is these are just words, and here's a good example of where the Abidhamma helps, because the Abidhamma will categorize all of the realities. And in the base of the Abhidhamma, Tanha, neither of these things actually exist. Tanha and Chanda are not in the, as far as I've studied, in the Abhidhamma, except maybe where they're categorized or where they're explained away as one of the realities. The reality is lobha. It's a cetasika. Lobha is unwholesome. So the point is that when you say kusala chanda, you're talking about a mind that doesn't have any lobha, which is a desire. But again, these are just words, and you have to say lobha, and you have to figure out what are the characteristics of lobha. And it's not logical. It's not about logic or reason. It's about it's about experience. So you will experience certain minds as having something called lobha, as having this kind of pull that is inclining you towards something, or dragging you towards something, exciting you in regards to something. And each of the Cetasikas have different qualities. Now, Chanda and Tanha are not actual realities. So the best way to answer these sorts of questions is to go to the Abhidhamma and say, say, look, if you want to talk about these things, you have to give me a specific example of a mind, and then we can say, does that mind have lobha or does that mind not have lobha? Because it's possible to have a chanda, which is Dhamma Chanda or Kusala Chanda, which has no it has no lobha in it or moha in it either. Tanha is always lobha. When we talk about tanha, we're always talking about lobha, as far as I know. But again, it's just a word that means thirst, as far as I understand. So um, it's semantics. It depends how you use the word. If you said thirst for meditation practice, could potentially be wholesome, depending on which cetasikas are in there, depending on the Abidhamma. So again, the importance or the usefulness of the Abidhamma, one usefulness of it. If a person barged into your house, surroundings, clearly with the intention to kill either you or someone near you, would you have let him do it and just console yourself with the thought that karma will deal with him? Let him do it. Well, there's some leeway there, but okay, that's assuming that the only options were kill this person or be killed, or let him kill someone near you. I mean, if it's going to be someone else, then you might try to sacrifice yourself instead. But again, how do you know what the result is going to be? The funny thing about these situations is they are karmic. Most of the time, they're based on very strong past karma. So you have cases where the perfectly plotted murder is unsuccessful, or you have cases where the perfectly plotted rescue is botched, and people die. The person dies no matter what people try to do. So because you can't know the outcome, it's quite dangerous to play God and to think that you're going to rule the situation and try to fix things in any situation. Um, so it's important. This is why, as Buddhists, we're very careful to go to the root and to stick to our guns in regards to the idea that wholesomeness leads to goodness, leads to happiness, and unwholesomeness leads to suffering. And so we're very careful that our actions, our speech, and our thoughts are wholesome. And we take that as a refuge, that we are not to blame for bad things if our minds are pure. And so we let the world, sometimes the world can barge in on us like this. We take it to be other people's business or our past business, not our present business. Nothing that we want to be involved in now. So that's what I would console myself in, not the thought that karma will deal with him. The fact that karma will deal with the person who does harm to others should be a cause for remorse, if anything, although remorse is unwholesome, but um, compassion and the belief that no one deserves to suffer, even those people who have done bad. Not that no one deserves to suffer. Suffering is never a good thing, no matter who it is. There's no gloating over people who have done bad things. That would be unwholesome. It would be unwholesome to gloat, and so we would feel compassion and wish for that person to find a way to become free from their suffering as well. We don't take so we don't ever take consolation in other people's suffering. He'll get his karma will get him back, that kind of thing. It's not a Buddhist thing to do. Nor is it a Buddhist thing to pass judgment on people because bad things have happened to them. So if someone's born with a disability, for example, it's not a Buddhist thing to dismiss them, thinking that they've done bad things in their past life. We have this kind of general belief and understanding that most likely there's some reason for why they're that way, but it certainly doesn't turn us to think of them as a bad person. And so some people have criticized Buddhism as having this potential, having the potential for abuse, whereby people, where we judge people who have disabilities and so on, who have a hard life. We say, well, it's just their bad karma, and so we look down upon them. which is not a Buddhist thing to do. It's just not a Buddhist thing to look down on people. Um, right. Anyway, that's that. How are we doing? Let's go look at the comments on the video. Yeah. So again, if you're looking at questions, it's on at radio. If you're looking for the questions or looking to ask questions, go to radio.sirimangalo.org. That's where the questions are. We've got now. Oh, I am started on the second page. Oops. Thank you, whoever said that. Yep, that's me, the technologically advanced. They call me the IT monk because I'm so smart with these things. Not. All right, so now we got some more popular questions. When I come to see something really clearly, catching a bad thought in the middle of daily activities, for instance, it often triggers joy in me. I feel I have insight. Do you think this joy is wholesome or is it based on ego? How to deal with it? Again, the importance or the usefulness of the Abidhamma. Joy, somanasa, can be either wholesome or unwholesome. In and of itself, it's not. It's neither. It can be accompanied by wholesomeness or unwholesomeness. If you like something and that has a joy associated with it, then that's unwholesome. If you do something positive, like help someone else or cultivate insight, and joy comes spontaneously from that, then that's neutral. If you do something wholesome and you feel good about that wholesomeness and feel joy doing good deeds at the moment of doing, then that's wholesome. But it's not wholesome because of the feeling. It's not wholesome because of the joy. Joy is indeterminate. It's a part of the mind that is neither positive or negative. It's indeterminate. It's neutral. Depends what it's accompanied with, and it can come in three spots. One, in an unwholesome mind. Two, in a wholesome mind. And three, in a mind that is the result of a wholesome mind. So feeling happy because of something good that you've done. The first one is unwholesome. The second one is wholesome, but the third one, the result, is neutral. And in all three cases, the quality of the mind is not determined by the joy. So joy is indeterminate. You see how useful the Abhidhamma is? I can answer that question without any doubt. Whether you believe me or not, this is another thing. So dealing with it is just to say to yourself, happy, happy, feeling, feeling. If you like it, say liking, liking, and so on. See it for what it is and let it go. Okay, we're going well. We'll have to see how these videos work, but for now anyway, it seems like I'm making lots and lots of videos. And of course, the main video will be up on YouTube, so you can always watch the long, long one when it's done. I'm considering ordaining, and I want to know how much interaction with family members is proper. I've seen the passage in the Anguttara Nikaya 232. My family worries they will not see me as a monk. I actually looked this up, and if your numbering is the same as mine, it's something to do with gratefulness. 232. If your numbering is actually the Book of Twos, number 32, then it's gratefulness. So I assume you're saying, wouldn't it be ungrateful if I avoided my parents? Now, if you're going by some other, maybe the Polytext Society numbering, then I have no idea what that sutta is about. Numbering is difficult because there's so many different numberings. So you're maybe worried about being grateful, but anyway, we'll take the question as it is. I can't think of any instance where interaction with family members is improper. There are certainly many instances where the Buddha gave exceptions for family members. For example, your parents, you're allowed to give them food first. If you get food, even before you've eaten any, you're allowed to give it to your parents. You're allowed to ask for medicine You're allowed to actually go to someone's house and beg and actually ask them for medicine. Now, of course, there's no there's no offense, but you shouldn't just go up to a stranger and ask them. But what the meaning is would be someone who supports you. So you can go stand in front of their house. If they say, "What do you need?" You can say, "Look, my parents are sick and I need medicine for them." This is actually allowed. You're allowed to go to visit your parents during the rains, because during the rains you're normally not allowed to travel, but you're allowed to go visit your parents, even if you're not invited. If there's some reason and you know that they're sick, but they don't send a messenger for you, but you know you find out that they're sick, you're able to go to them and stay overnight, up to 6 nights. This kind of thing. So there's an obvious um, potential for relationships. Now, that being said, it's not advisable to get too close to family members, besides your parents especially. So getting involved with brothers, sisters, and cousins and so on, just because they're relatives, it can be dangerous because the reason for associating has nothing to do with the Dhamma often. So that being the case, something that we should regard with certain care. Now, your parents, of course, the idea of being grateful to them and giving something back to them inspires us often to want to meditate with them or encourage them in good deeds and um, stay with them to hopefully rub off on them, for example. So there's nothing wrong with that. So I would say basically what you can tell your family is there's no need to worry that uh, um, they will always be able to see you as a monk. It's not because you're a monk that they won't be able to see you. It might be because you're off in the forest in Thailand. That being the case, yes, they may not see you for many years until you have the support and the ability to return, or until they have the ability to come to visit you. So that's something you have to deal with. Of course, for Thai people, this is a non-issue, or for Asian people in general, it's usually a non-issue because the person will ordain nearby, and so they're able to actually visit with each other. But there's certainly nothing about being a monk that requires you to be apart from your parents at the very least, and really your relatives in general. There's nothing to say that we have to be apart from people as Buddhists. We're to try to cultivate seclusion as a general way of living our lives, but you can do that when you're around your relatives as well. You go to visit them, and you're in your room a lot of the time. You come out to visit, to talk, and then you go back and rest and do your meditation in your room. There's no uh, there's no incompatibility there. But there is a nice story in the Visuddhimagga that I would encourage you to read about this monk who was so intent on solitude that many years later, after he'd ordained, he went back to see his parents, and they didn't recognize him. Uh, and they fed him and supported him for 3 months, and he never told them he was their son, and they never found out that he was their son. And so they gave him this robe at the end and sent him back and said, "Could you give this to my son? I know he's in the monastery that you're headed to." And so he headed off, and halfway along the way, he met his teacher, going to visit this village where his parents were. And so he gave the robe to his teacher and said, "Look, I'm much happier back at my monastery. I'm going to go back there and live in seclusion." And the teacher looked at the robe and he didn't quite understand, but he went on and came to the village. And the mother saw this monk's teacher coming alone, and thought that that meant that her son had passed away, because she assumed that the son would be with the teacher. And so she started crying, and the teacher said, "What's wrong?" And she explained, and explained how she'd given the robe to be given to her son. And so he pulled out the robe and he said, "Was it this robe?" And he said, "That was your son. You spent 3 months with him, but he's so dedicated to seclusion, he didn't want to get involved with his relatives." So that's a kind of story you maybe don't want to tell your parents if you're looking for their permission to ordain. But he was the example of a very ardent meditator. And the Buddha, one of the first things he did was go back to see his father and teach his, not one of the first things, but eventually he did go back to see his father and teach his wife and his son, and so on. So there's certainly nothing against that. And following by that example, we can certainly try our best to help them out to realize the goodness that we've realized. So there you go. My understanding of the Buddhist conception of love is that it is a kind of delusion, an attachment with attendant negative connotations. If this is the case, how could we characterize the emotion motivation which impels a bodhisattva to be reborn? Well, love is not delusion, and again, back to the Abhidhamma, um, love is a word and is ambiguous because most often in the West we're referring to eros, right? Eros, which is lustful love, or not even lustful, but just desire for something. I love apples, or I love my wife or my girlfriend or my boyfriend or whatever, or I love my children. Adoration and so on is often unwholesome, not delusion, based on delusion, but is craving or greed based, desire based. Um, and so that's unwholesome. But love that is a desire for beings to be happy, wishing for them to be happy, or acting, the impulsion that that moves us to act for the benefit of others. This is metta, and this is a positive state. It's wholesome. It's worldly. It won't get you to nibbana, but it's wholesome, and if cultivated, can eventually lead to limitless love for the whole universe, and which can lead you to be born as a Brahma, and can give great states of concentration, which are also beneficial to the practice of insight meditation. So depends what you mean by love, but the emotion motivation that impels a bodhisattva to be reborn. Okay, the reason a bodhisattva in the Theravada tradition is reborn, and I'm assuming you're talking about the Theravada bodhisattva without the V, because with the V in there it gets kind of weird, and the Mahayana conception gets pretty radical. But what impels a bodhisattva to be reborn again is delusion and defilement. The only reason we're reborn is because of some kind of attachment. Now, all that a bodhisattva has done is refused to listen or to accept an enlightenment that is devoid of omniscience. So given the opportunity to become enlightened in this life without being omniscient, they discard it. Uh, there's that. Now, what moves them to do it? Um, again, so now we have to distinguish between bodhisattvas. Some bodhisattvas are not going to become Buddhas, and they make a determination to become a Buddha and are unsuccessful. And often these determinations that they make are based on ego or desire or whatever. In the case of our Buddha, he made a vow out of, I guess you could say, wisdom and confidence and faith, because he was a highly developed ascetic who had magical powers and insight, and he knew with certainty, with confidence, that if he listened to the Buddha's teaching, he would become an arahant very quickly, right away. Um, and so he made the determination to go one step further, to go the next step, which was a huge step, out of wisdom and understanding. It's interesting, curious to note that as soon as he became a Buddha, one of the first things he thought of was not um, taking advantage of his omniscience, was to pass away into parinibbana, which he would have saved himself a lot of time had he just done that back in the time of Dipankara Buddha. But the result of his omniscience was such that he wasn't able to do it, because immediately he was asked to teach. Brahma came down and asked him to teach, because he was omniscient. No one would come down and ask, and Brahma would not come down and ask me to teach, for example, because I'm not omniscient. But he came down and asked the Buddha to teach, and so it was based on this quality. what motivated it. And so again, this is it differs from person to person. But the real bodhisattvas, it would seem they do it out of confidence and wisdom on that occasion where they are recognized and where another Buddha says, see that guy's lying in the mud, he's going to become a Buddha in a future life, and so on. Could you clarify what the differences are between insight, mindfulness, and vigilance? Can I be very mindful but have no insight at all, for instance? Again, words, English words. Uh, Insight is the translation of the word jnana, which means knowledge. That's something that arises in a flash. It's not something that lasts. Mindfulness is what we generally translate the word sati as, although I've said before that the word mindfulness sounds better associated with the word sampajanya, which is a different quality entirely. Mindfulness would be wisdom-based, whereas sati is a recognition. And vigilance would be a translation of appamada, which is the opposite of negligence. So, is it possible to have sati without give rise to insight? Yes, if your mindfulness is on a concept, you can be mindful of concepts or you can be mindful of reality. If you're mindful of the Buddha, for example, Buddha nusati, well, that's maybe a bad one because Buddha nusati actually has the potential to become insight because Buddha nusati is mindful of the qualities of the Buddha, which are actually ultimate realities, like wisdom and enlightenment and so on, compassion. But same if you're mindful of or you focus on a color, for example, and say blue, 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 or red, 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 it won't give rise to insight. It'll just give rise to calm because those are just concepts. If you focus on death, or you focus on repulsiveness, like the hair, fur, nails, teeth, skin, flesh, and so on. You focus on the parts of the body and cultivate dispassion towards them, give up your attachment to the body. This will also um, not directly give rise to insight into impermanent suffering and non-self because these are concepts, they're not real. They can be quite helpful, especially that one it can be quite helpful for insight, but not directly. To give rise to insight, you have to focus instead on ultimate reality of the body and the mind, the five aggregates, etc., etc. Vigilance seems to be entirely based on mindfulness. If you're mindful, you're considered to be vigilant. If you're unmindful, you're considered to be negligent. But it can be construed in a more general context. For example, not drinking or taking drugs and alcohol reduces your vigilance. It leads to negligence. So the word vigilance could be construed in a more broad base, but technically it's usually equated with mindfulness. In order to follow Buddhism, I must not cling to happiness or people that give me happiness. Does this mean that I shouldn't make friends and/or stop associating with my friends, as I enjoy being around my friends and it gives me happiness? Okay, the word happiness, again, the ambiguity. Buddhism says that none of that brings you happiness. And that's the unfortunate thing, that if these things gave you happiness, true happiness, then you should cling to them and hold on to them. But because they don't give you happiness, clinging to them is a cause of suffering. That's what Buddhism says. Buddhism doesn't say must not, should not. Buddhism says if, then. So it's much more powerful. It's not trying to convince you or coerce you into being one way or another. It's telling you the truth. And it's up to you to realize the truth, appreciate it, or deny the truth. So if you cling to people, the fact that or the idea that it makes you happy is an illusion. And as you practice meditation, you realize that it's not actually making you happy. It's actually just giving you some pleasure, which entices you to cling stronger, which eventually leads to repeated distress and suffering when every time you don't get what you want, or every time you're forced to strive for the pleasant states again. So the enjoying being around your friends, except where it's involved with wholesomeness. There's the case where you're helping each other, where you're appreciating each other, where you're compassionate, and so on, where you're able to support each other. That is positive. But the enjoyment, the liking or the attachment to pleasurable states is unwholesome and will lead you to suffering when you have to leave your friends, when you're surrounded by unpleasant people, etc., etc. It means you're vulnerable. You're always vulnerable to change, and therefore suffering is in your future because of that attachment. How are we doing? 51 minutes? Maybe I'll just go an hour for my first round. We've done a lot already, right? I was thinking another way I could do this is just come in here every so often to make videos, but make one video a day instead of all lots a week. But I don't have to do it on YouTube either. Anyway, something to think about. How to practice Vipassana meditation. I'm constantly aware of my mind and body. Is this Vipassana? In which sutta can I read about this? I never found any sutta that is fully describing the Eightfold Noble Path. Is there such a sutta? There's the Magga Vibhanga Sutta, which details the path, but again, it's still quite terse, and it'll give you some insight. But the whole of the Buddha's teaching throughout is the practice of insight meditation. It's anytime the Buddha is talking about the aggregates or the senses or dependent origination or the Four Noble Truths, this is all descriptions of what we call insight meditation. Constantly aware of your mind and body, is this Vipassana? If there is a clear awareness of them as they are. So just being aware of your body is not Vipassana, but being aware of your body as it is. For example, recognizing it for what it is. The cultivation of recognition. When you recognize seeing as seeing, hearing as hearing, when you recognize pain as pain, when you recognize movement as movement, as when you recognize it as a reality that arises and ceases. This is Vipassana. Where can you read about that? Well, the Satipatthana Sutta is the one we always go to, so I would read that, Majjhima Nikaya number 10. But best way is to actually start to practice and take on a respected technique. I would recommend the technique that I promote in my book and so on, but I'm sure other teachers would have different ideas. But I would say there's more required than just knowing. And the commentary to the Mahasatipatthana Sutta says this. It says dogs know that they're going, and that doesn't get rid of delusion. So in order to really practice knowing that you're going, you have to have mindfulness, you have to have sati that reminds you this is this. So this is why we say to ourselves, walking, walking, because it reminds us it is what it is and keeps the mind straight, keeps the mind objective, which allows the arising of insight, which is the purpose of Vipassana meditation. Okay, I'm gonna go for 5 more minutes and then giving up for the day. I think that's enough. We were out this morning. I just got back this morning from my father's. Had to leave early in the morning. Took the train and then went out for lunch and had to give a talk this morning. And tomorrow we got a big celebration here. Anybody in the area, you're welcome to come. We're celebrating the Buddha's birthday tomorrow because it's a Sunday. And it's also Mother's Day tomorrow, so there'll be something about that. Tonight, actually, we're also doing the candle thing where we walk around. I don't know what we'll walk around, but we're going to do some kind of special ceremony at 8 tonight. Okay, so we'll do a couple more here. Why do people usually lose all memory when they die? Is it because the memory is stored in the brain? Even an accident causing brain damage can make someone lose memory. Then again, if it's stored in the brain, how do some remember their past lives? There's a really neat book, and I think the important parts you can get from essays that are probably online by Raymond Tullis, I think is his name. The book is called Aping Humanity, and he rails on and on about how this idea, I think it's him. No, it may have been someone else now that I think of it, but this idea that anything is stored in the brain is such a, yeah, it's him. He said it's such a slip. It's such a obvious error because the brain is made up of molecules. It's made up of atoms. It's made up of bits. It's made up of cells, if you want to go that far. The neurons are just cells, and so what is stored in the brain, I think, is electric impulses, right? That's all that's stored in the brain. The idea that a memory could be stored in the brain is a huge leap of ignorance. It's it's sloppy. It's imprecise. You can't have a memory stored in a brain because they're two very different things. A memory is a part of an experience, which no scientist can explain with the material realm, not yet. No one can explain a experience. That's why they call it the hard problem. This is really hard. It's unsolved as of yet, and most likely will remain unsolved because, as you say, it's possible to remember past lives. That's a big killer for that theory. So what is stored in the brain are you could say formations which mirror experiences and therefore trigger memories. So one reason I would suggest, and again this is more going by my own reasoning than by anything I've read, that the brain triggers, um, it provides stimulus, it provides experiences, visions, and so on that produce memories. It provides the stimulus that it actually gives rise to certain minds, certain experiences. So it is understood to be possible. This is why an arahat doesn't immediately, an enlightened being doesn't immediately pass away, because there are still minds that are created by the body. The brain can create experience, as far as I understand, and that makes sense. But it's not the only thing that creates experience. Minds can give rise to new minds, and so it's more complicated than that. That's why there's, if you read in the Tanha, there's 24 different kinds of causal relationships, and it's not just this causes this. There's all sorts of craziness involved. Um, so that's one reason why you see a huge memory loss. But I think another one that's considered and understood is the trauma of being in the womb. It's disorienting, especially with the loss of the physical, which is a cause for so many familiar prompts. So everything being new is a cause for great disorientation and also disregard for the past. Because everything's new, it's exciting and it's all-encompassing and overwhelming. So it quickly obliterates any mental memories. Because when you're born in heaven, for example, it doesn't do that. You're able to. It's so smooth that you're able to keep your memories from the past life. But being born as a human being, it's overwhelming. It's traumatic. Being in the womb for 9 months is so new and intense. The experiences are so intense that they obliterate a lot of our past memories as well. So that's how I would understand that issue. I guess I'm not going to do a video about this one, but someone asks, is Nirvana just a concept too? And no, Nirvana is a reality. It's not conceptual. Concepts don't exist. Nirvana exists. Okay, it's 6 o'clock. I'm gonna cop out and say that was an hour, and thanks. That was fun. I'm gonna have to consider whether to do this like daily and put out one video a day or weekly and then spend the week putting together the videos that I made. I have to see which works better. I guess probably the weekly one, because then also weekly I could do this neat thing where I have a guest on and they read the questions off. But that throws off the whole recording thing. I'm not sure how I'm going to record in that case. But anyway, I'll figure something out. So I hope this has been interesting. I hope there are some, I don't know how many visitors we had, watchers. How many viewers do we have? Ooh, 32. Oh, thanks, guys. Hey, thanks for showing up and wishing you all a happy Saturday and good meditation and cultivation of goodness. See you all next time. Be well.